Hello, Cardinal fans, and welcome to another episode of the St. Louis Cardinals Unrestricted podcast. This is your host, Christian May-Suzuki, and today it's going to be a bit of a short episode. I've been on a bit of a vacation, self-imposed hiatus recently, and I'm actually recording this from my grandparents' house in North Carolina on my phone. So apologies for any issues with the audio or anything like that, but there's just a few things I'd like to talk about today. First being, Alex Reyes is one of the big stories of the last few weeks. He has been performing very, very well as the closer, and he recently set a record for most saves to start a career. Now, I've been on the record on this podcast saying that it would probably be best at some point for Reyes to turn to a starter to fulfill his full potential. I guess I'm eating my words there, huh? It seems like he is really shown his ability to hold down the closer role, and he's proven that to be able to function there both in a isolated sense and in a long season over the long season sense. So it seems like it's been a good fit for him, and it's good to see. It kind of sucks that profile of his can't pan out to a starter like we were always hoping, especially with some of the issues that we've had with starters. But it's not, obviously, having a pitcher succeed in a particular role, especially the closer role, it's not something that you would complain about or something that you're going to get angry about. So, I mean, it's definitely one of the biggest positives that we can take away from this season. And it's probably one of the only ones that carries over in the next season, or should carry over pretty smoothly into next season. Now, one that I'm not 100% sure will, it's a very optimistic sign, but I'm not sure entirely whether it will carry over, is some of the ways that players have been seeing breaking balls recently. In particular, Harrison Bader has put everyone on notice by his ability to see breaking balls somehow again, which, considering that any slider you threw at him last year was a flail, it's pretty impressive. It's really good to see that he's proving some of the haters wrong, and I know that there are plenty of Harrison Bader haters out there, and he's finally sort of molding into a player that we can really see as a plus center fielder and as someone that can start for many years to come and can be that main center fielder. You know, like I've always said, the Kevin Kiermaier type, where he might not be the greatest hitter in the world and he might not put up spectacular offensive production, but his defensive value and what he brings in the outfield and the range will sort of cement him and his spot in the lineup for plenty of time. I think that there is no reason for them to really take him out if he continues to trend upward, if he continues to play the defense that he plays, and the team can continue to build something around him. You know, obviously he's not, if we're going to expect him to move up in the lineup at this point, it might be a little bit much, but sitting in the 7-8 spot, doing what he does, kind of the Colton Wong-esque role, he's done a good job. And, you know, all the props in the world to Bader and what he's been done, being able to see a breaking ball, because you usually don't get that kind of thing at age 27, where you're able to suddenly see breaking balls again, or you're able to make that major change or that major leap in vision or in just hitting approach. Now, another guy that has done that is Tyler O'Neill. Tyler O'Neill has looked really good this season, and it seems like that he's made his own leap. And this one I think is a little bit more solid. I think I've always been a big Tyler O'Neill guy. He's always shown that he has the ability. I know that there's a huge gap between AAA and the majors now, but I don't think a few years ago when he was tearing up the PCL, it was nearly as pronounced as it is now. I think that even MLB players have commented that there was a major jump And there's now a humongous gap, as big as it's ever been, between the AAA and the MLB. And I think some of these guys who have come up and tried to pull starts out, outside of the Alex Manoahs and the Tariq Skubal, there really hasn't been anybody that has been able to come up and succeed. A lot of guys who've come up and gone an inning and gotten blown up. I know, they're on my fantasy team. But not a lot of guys who are able to really consistently come in and make starts and make an impact as a rookie. Even the most highly touted guys like the Jared Kelenics of the world are struggling to make that adjustment from AAA to the majors. I think Tyler O'Neill gives us a sort of a pathway for guys like that, where there are going to be big holes in their game for a few years, and it is the difference between filling that hole and really patching it up and turning yourself into a player that can function without, again, it's like a quilt. If it has a big hole in it, it's not going to work. But if you can patch that hole up a little bit, you at least have something to work with. And for Tyler O'Neill, that big hole was striking out. And obviously he still strikes out plenty, but he started to sew up the hole a little bit. He started to put it's like a netting there where, yeah, it might not be the most stable thing in the world, but it works. It covers you up. It covers all the bases, and he is turned into a potentially a really, really solid 5-tool player. And that is very, very important for the Cardinals. The development of Tyler O'Neill, especially after the death of Taveras, having a young outfielder to really develop and replace, it's incredibly important. I think, in particular, having a power corner, because of what Taveras was going to be and what he represented to the organization, the role that he filled. It's taken a few years to fill it back, but I think they finally might have found that guy in O'Neill. So the next segment, or I'll give it, I guess, half a segment, is sort of related to this, and it's what we say about Jeff Albert and his role in all of this. There have been plenty of reports that he has, or that players have gone to other sources and other coaches to try and help themselves out, but really, that's not necessarily something that's out of this world or normal or abnormal. And I don't know if it's necessarily an indictment on Jeff Albert per se. I think when you're in a clubhouse for that long and you're hearing the same opinions and the same advice, and you're hearing the same sort of perspective and seeing the same sort of eyes, sometimes you just want another set of eyes, a new fresh pair to look on and see what other people aren't seeing. Because when coaches are seeing the same guys every single day, 162 games, multiple years, they're going to sort of find the same quirks and the same things that have bugged them about a particular player's swing, and then they'll work to correct that. But they might not see the other little things that they aren't focused on because they're so worried about rectifying these particular things that they see. So it just comes down to having another person see another thing happening and realize that there is an issue in another spot. Is that necessarily mean that Jeff Albert is blind? Jeff Albert isn't doing anything? His approach is being detrimental? I don't think so. Does it mean that he's some sort of guru god? Just took him a few years to become an elite hitting coach that can develop our players? I don't know about that either. It's really only time will tell at the end of the day. And yes, Bader and O'Neill have really come along, but there are plenty of guys who are still not quite there. Guys like Tommy Edman, who, while he's hit okay and he's hit decently, he's had some slumps, and he hasn't really quite turned into that leadoff hitter that we're looking for yet. The OBP is still low. Speed isn't quite there on the paths. not the Astros-esque power leadoff where he can just hit home runs off of it. So it's a very weird spot to be in that point. So we have to sort of look at it from a outside perspective and from a more general perspective than taking these individual little people in these pieces and trying to use them as anecdotes. Because at the end of the day, we don't really know what goes on back there. We only really know what the results show us. And right now, they're getting better. Players are generally striking out less. They aren't walking more per se, but it's something that we can look at as a positive note. Another positive note, Paul Goldschmidt has really been tearing the cover off the ball recently. Now, he has finally hit the 800 OPS mark, which obviously there's a couple of aspects to that. It's nice in that he's hitting the ball well and he's finally getting up to a legitimate spot for the role that he is. He's getting to a legitimate role of production. But 800 OPS for the three-hitter, for the guy who's supposed to be the best hitter on the team or the second best hitter on the team, the guy that's huge centerpiece trade a few years ago. We're looking more, if he can continue this the rest of the year, sure. But that slump at the beginning really was not good. And it was an extended one, too. It wasn't just the first few games of the season. And I get that he's a slow starter sometimes, but when you were the guy, the main guy, the leader of the team, and you just suck for 2 months, it's going to have a huge impact on your team. And it's not good for your team. It's not sustainable. It's not something that a star player should do. And maybe that's why he had some postseason, or it contributed to his postseason struggles in Arizona, or his inability to get to the postseason in Arizona. Because when you're not an incredibly talented team, and then your best player has a 2-month streak where he just hits 100, $150, what are you supposed to do as a team? There's nothing to be done. And in many ways, that's sort of what happened to the Cardinals. A slow start, it obviously wasn't the only problem, but a slow start from Goldschmidt did contribute to a lot of hitting woes and a lot of issues, and it did, in a sense, probably lose us a few games. So we need him to be like this, or at least a consistent 850, 900 OPS guy for the whole season. Can't just be, the last 60%, the last 50%, It has to be the whole thing. We need, for a guy like that, for what we're relying on him to do, for who he means, or what he means in the role he plays on the team, and the role that he's supposed to fill, that kind of stuff just doesn't fly. And hopefully we don't get to see a lot of that next year. But I think it just goes into my next point, where when you looking at next year, are we asking ourselves, can we actually do it next year? Because that can be, or that should be, the focus or the idea at this point. Obviously, you don't want to give up on the season yet, but at 41 or 42 and 43, at 500, not exactly the spot you want to be in, honestly. And when we're having to, again, obviously coming out of the All-Star break, we've been doing well, but when you're having to rely on wins against, the Pirates, and you're losing to the Pirates, and you're having to rely on wins against sub-500 teams to bolster your playoff position, that's just not the way that I like to see a team win and a team make it, because you're not battle-tested, you're not really focused and ready, and when it comes down to playing a series with a tough team, you're not going to do anything. This is the St. Louis Cardinals, We're not here to make the postseason as consolation prize. the team is here to win a title. That's the goal. And is this team in position to win a title right now with this pitching staff, with the way that the hitting has started the year and just the general slow start and the record that we have? Probably not. So look to next year. And again, what is the best option for next year? The answer is Jose Berrios. And yet the Cardinals won't do it. I get the asking price is lofty. I get that it's high. But Matthew Liberatore, with the way he's pitching, is not going to do anything to help Paul Goldschmidt or Nolan Arenado. And right now, that's what we need to do. The Cardinals need to help Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado compete for a title in the next 2 to 3 years. Jose Berrios will not only allow us to do that, he can also pair with Jack Flaherty as an elite 1-2 pair for as long as we allow it to, as long as Berrios is signed, as long as we can ink him to a decent deal, it's totally worth it, no matter what prospects we give up. The dude has got electric stuff. He's got a really nice record on a really crappy Twins team. And I get that pitching wins don't matter in that respect, but he's pitched well. He's won for his team that isn't able to win. And he's been able to hold things down when he needs to. He's got good stuff. The ERA is around where Shohei's is. It's not stellar, but it's a good spot. And if you move him to the NL and you move him to the second starter behind Flaherty, or even he can serve as the first starter with Flaherty out for a while, he's that good. So, look, man, for the future, for the present, that's really the move you have to make. And at this point, I don't know if I'll be satisfied with anything else. I think that there is something that is so blatantly, obviously in front of us that could fix all the problems, or a majority of the problems, not just for this year, but for next year, and the year after that, and years after that. The question is that will the Michaelis extension make DeWitt not want to spend any more on pitchers like that? And if that really is the roadblock, it's really a true shame. Really is. That would be a goddamn shame. Anyway, I appreciate you all for listening. We are hopefully moving in a better direction this season with that big win over the Cubs. But again, another team that's struggling, another game that we won off of probably their own errors and their issues more so than our own merits. So if we do make the postseason, sure, it's wonderful. Right now, do I have confidence with the way that we're doing it? Absolutely not. And hopefully they can change that. They can get on a hot streak. You never know because it's baseball. But man, they do not look like they are prepared to do that. So with that being said, thank you all so much, and we will see you next week. Go Cardinals.